Okay, one more set of short-run costs. We have actually mentioned average costs before. Yeah, I did it when we did fixed costs, and I talked about the idea of fixed cost per unit. And so yeah, so that's what your average cost is. Overall, your average cost, your average total cost. Yeah, it's simply the cost per unit. So yeah, that's your average total cost, which I will always tend to call average cost. Yeah, they're the same thing. Average total cost, and average cost are the same, and that's made up of the variable cost per unit, which is average variable cost, which we haven't talked about yet, and the fixed cost per unit, which is average fixed cost, which we have talked about. So what we're going to look at now, first of all, is we're going to look at average variable cost. And I think this is the point at which confusion, if it hasn't already set in, particularly does. Yeah, because I think what people, the biggest kind of misunderstanding, I think, is what's the difference between marginal cost and average variable cost? Because aren't they both the cost per unit, the variable cost per unit? And they kind of are. But the way you want to think about it is this: marginal cost shows me the extra cost of making this pen. Let's suppose this is the first one. Let's suppose its marginal cost is £1. Obviously, at this stage, since I've only made one pen, my average variable cost is also £1. But after this point, things may begin to differ. Suppose that the second one, the marginal cost of the second one is 80p. So the first one cost me an extra £1 individually. The second one costs me an extra 80p individually. Well, on average, how much are my variable costs per unit? The answer is that one was an extra £1 of variable costs. That one was an extra 80p of variable cost. Therefore, my variable cost per unit is £1 plus 80p divided by 2. That's 90p. If I then add a third one, and this one is 60p, the marginal cost of this one is 60p, then it's £1 plus 80p for the second one plus 60p for the third one. That's my total variable cost, remember. So my total variable cost of 3 pence is £2.40 divided by 3 is 80p on average, and so on. So the marginal cost shows the individual cost of each extra. Let's take pens as our example. The marginal cost shows the individual cost of each extra pen. Average variable cost shows all the marginal costs averaged out. And the reason we know that's true is that we know that if we add up all the marginal costs, then that gives us total variable cost. But if we divide total variable cost by output, then that is going to give me average variable cost, the variable cost per unit. So in the same way as we said total fixed cost divided by output gives me average fixed cost, we said, remember, we had the £8,000 of airline or something, and we said if it had eight passengers, then the cost per passenger was £1,000. Here we can do the same. We say, well, look, let's take all the variable costs of the firm, divide by the number of units or the number of passengers, and that'll give us the variable cost per unit or per passenger. So marginal cost is the cost of each extra pen individually. Average variable cost is those marginal costs averaged out to give us the cost of a representative pen. Because it's all very well saying, well, this one costs £1 and this one costs 20p and this one costs £1.50 and so on. But obviously a firm's going to need to know, on average, how much do its units cost, because otherwise it's not going to be able to set its price. So, what does that look like? This is very similar to the marginal product and average product thing that we did when we looked at product curves kind of earlier in the course. But what we said is that average variable cost is total variable cost divided by output. And total variable cost is the marginal cost of each unit added up, and so on, divided. So average variable cost is all the marginal costs added up divided by output. So it's based on marginal cost. If we take our marginal cost curve, again, this is units or quantity or stuff, this is money, and we take our marginal cost that looks like that. Here's the first unit, cost me an extra 10 quid. Well, funnily enough, therefore, my average variable cost at that point is also 10 quid, because my average variable cost is the £10 divided by 1 unit. The extra marginal cost is £10 divided by 1 unit, which is 10 quid. However, as soon as we get the second unit costs me, say, 6 quid. My average variable cost is now 10 plus 6 divided by 2, that's going to be 8. Oops. That's going to be 8 there. Like the marginal product and average product curve, the third unit costs £5. That's less than the current average. £5 is less, the extra £5 is less than the current average of 8. So the average is going to go down again. The average variable cost is going to fall again. I mean, you can calculate it if you want. It's 21. 10 plus 6 plus 5 is 21. Divided by 3 is 7. But we can predict that it's going to fall because we know that if the marginal is less than the average, then the average will fall. Here's the marginal of the next one. It's less than the current average. That's below that. So the average is going to come down. There's the next one. The marginal is less than the average still. Although the marginal is rising, it's still below the current average. Therefore, the average comes down again. So as long as the marginal is below the average variable cost will fall. As soon as the marginal goes above the average variable cost, then the average variable cost is going to rise. And what that means is that MC, that point, is the lowest point of average variable cost. And in the next video, you'll also see that it's the minimum point of the average total cost. So average variable cost is just the average of all of our marginal costs. Because of the way in which marginals and averages relate, if the marginal is below the average will come down. If the marginal is above the average will go up. And like we said with the marginal product, the interesting zone is here, where diminishing returns have begun, marginal cost is starting to rise, but because it's rising, but because it's still below the average continues to fall until the two lines touch one another. After that point, the marginal is above the average, and the average will start to rise again. So that's that.